Ymedia.
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 Stay tuned with Ymedia.
Ymedia is a media company. With 360-degree approach in reaching the audience over 8 media platforms. Television, Channel Y Canada, 24/7, available nationwide. Toronto, Ottawa.
Welcome to Ymedia. Today we're here in Ottawa.
Vancouver.
Hello and welcome back to Ymedia Newsroom. I'm Ramona Singh, and as Canada gets closer to Europe when it comes to making it one of its bigger trading partners to be able to diversify away from the United States with this trade war that Canada and the United States have been in since President Trump took office for his second term. Well, now you have Prime Minister Mark Carney that will attend the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's State of Union address in Strasbourg on September 16th. Now, his appearance is at a time where Canada is seeking a closer relationship when it comes to the economic, defense, as well as diplomatic relations with Europe. And this is going to be at the time where, if September 8th goes ahead with the retaliatory tariffs that take place against US goods that will be important to Canada, then this is just September 16th. So it will be at a very escalated trade war with the United States. This invitation was reportedly extended before the latest US Canada tariff escalations, but the timing of this visit is of great significance, as it's very important because Canada is now showing up to more of the EU based conventions, summit, and this is the State of Union address. So it's really showing that Canada is getting closer to its European allies, as it still has the same views when it comes to diplomacy and trade and trying to keep the status quo as is with the European partners. Now, this invitation is significant because it's not just a situation where you're wondering, oh, it's just being cordial. Canada is working very closely, has become the first non-European country admitted to the EU's Security Action for Europe. So this is very important. It's called SAFE, which is a defense initiative. And then you also have Canada-EU partnership that covers trade, defense, energy, technology, climate policy, as well as critical minerals. So this next Canada-EU summit is scheduled to take place also in Canada on October 29th and 30th. And then you also have Canada and EU that are already trade under the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, which is called CETA. And you also have Prime Minister Mark Carney that has promoted stronger cooperation among middle powers, as you have the American foreign and trade policy that have become a lot more unpredictable, even to the European countries. So there is this situation that we're all witnessing where Canada has accelerated its European engagement since Carney became Prime Minister. And if you recall, in May, he became the first non-European national leader to participate in the European Political Community Summit. And we covered that. It was very significant. And Prime Minister Mark Carney has argued that this middle power must cooperate to defend sovereignty and rebuild international systems, increasingly at a time where you have what America is doing under President Trump. Now, Canada's participation in SAFE also creates an opportunity for Canadian defense companies to compete in European procurement programs. So in June alone, you had Prime Minister Mark Carney and the EU leaders who discussed expansion cooperations in defense, critical minerals, environment protection. So this is a time where we're seeing the engagement take place, as it is this Prime Minister's number one objective to make sure that Canada is able to diversify as much as possible when it comes to trade away from the United States with countries that are far more predictable. And the latest numbers are in for the Bank of Montreal and Scotiabank that have opened Canadian bank earnings seasons with a stronger than expected results. So Scotiabank described its performance as record quarter, helping drive the Toronto Stock Exchange to new closing highs. And so that's very significant because at a time where we're seeing a lot of unpredictability in the Toronto Stock Exchange, and the reactions, well, it's important to see how well the banks are doing. So now Canadian banks remain heavily weighed within the Toronto Stock Exchange, which essentially means that stronger financial sector earnings can move the entire index. So investors are right now watching credit quality, loan growth, as well as consumer delinquencies during these trade uncertainties and what's created this uneven economic growth. So this market reaction is suggesting that investors remain very confident in Canada's largest banks. And so therefore we saw a very strong quarter, but it does not eliminate the economic risks that are going to be imposed by tariffs, so that we're going to see what it means once when the tariffs kick in on both sides as this war escalates between the United States and Canada. An interesting thing, the political saying of politics makes strange bedfellows. Well, we have Rachel Notley and Jason Kenney, both former premiers of Alberta, have now united against the Alberta separation movement. So this is very significant, as these former Alberta premiers are putting aside their political differences to co-chair a business-led campaign opposing Alberta separation. We know that the referendum is just around the corner on October 19th. So you have these former premiers stepping up, where you have Notley as well as Kenney. And Notley was the former Alberta NDP premier, and then the opposition leader, and then you had Jason Kenney, who was the former United Conservative premier. And so now since then they were direct political opponents during provincial careers, but now after, not being premiers, they have decided to come together, and this initiative is associated with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Now, this campaign will make an economic and political case for Alberta to remain in Confederation Canada. And Jason Kenney said that he was willing to place patriotism over his partisanship, which is being a conservative, and Rachel Notley being an NDP. And now this Alberta separatism has become an issue because it gained quite a momentum, and then therefore there was also disputes with Ottawa over energy equalization payments as well as federal authority. So now you have this cross-partisan conservative NDP campaign in terms of the two leaders, former premiers, who are coming together to make sure that they're able to let Albertans know that it is in their best interest to stay in Confederation. Of course, when we get closer to the referendum that will take place in Alberta, we're going to do a deep dive and coverage of what's taking place on the ground. And in our next news, we have Ontario that's considering new orders to target assets linked to organized crime. So this is interesting, and we'd love to hear what your thoughts are, as Ontario is consulting on whether to introduce where unexplained wealth comes from. So this would be the unexplained wealth order, which would compel people to explain how they acquired assets suspected of being connected to criminal activity. So now a court would issue an unexplained wealth order, and then the asset owner would be required to explain the sources of the wealth. So this tool is intended to combat money laundering and organized crime, and it may be used without first obtaining a criminal conviction. So can you imagine, because this order would create the basis of whether there should be a criminal conviction when it comes to money laundering or proceeds obtained through organized crime. And British Columbia has already adopted the unexplained wealth order, And supporters say that the mechanism is targeting sophisticated financial crimes that are a lot harder to detect. And critics are also raising concerns about, due process, meaning what does it mean for privacy? Or this would be essentially reversing the burden, the traditional burden of proof, meaning before, um, you would have the police that would have to investigate. And then if there's enough proof, lay charges, right? And then it would be within the court system on the prosecution side to show evidence of why they believe, the people that are charged would essentially, it's because of money laundering or the proceeds are from organized crime. This is the reversal where you just have a court order, then now you have to prove that this property or these assets are, earned through legitimate means, not from criminal proceedings. So this changes the whole burden of proof, makes the burden on the person with the assets versus the state that charged the person to show why they're guilty. This is now saying, hey, we suspect you're guilty of a crime, so please show us evidence of how you obtained your wealth or your assets and show us how you obtained this clean money. In essence, that's not money laundering. So, the background on this is that criminal organizations are right now and frequently concealing their proceeds through property. So, money obtained through crime, they'll invest it in property or businesses, fronts, right, for money laundering, cleaning the money, the proceeds, or very complex financial structures that it's very hard to wrap your head around. So when it comes to conventional prosecutions, sometimes they may fail when assets are held through nominees or when evidence is located outside of Canada. So this measure would essentially put the burden of proof on the person with the assets to prove, hey, I'm not guilty, right? Versus the other way around. The due process is you're innocent until proven guilty. So even though the police charge you and you go through the court system, due process is you're innocent until the prosecution can prove you're guilty. This, the other way around, is you get a court order, which is assuming you're guilty, and now you have to prove you're innocent by showing how you obtained those assets. So very interesting times for what Ontario will is looking at putting this forward, and BC has already done so. And the other important thing about BC is it's known as previously has had major criticism that Canada has been a safe haven for money laundering, and that's always been the criticism about Canada. And so it's interesting how BC's taken this measure as a counter action to what's been taking place. So this is quite an interesting time. And you are no stranger to Instagram. If you use it or if you don't use it, at least you know about Instagram. So, well, there was a recent trial when it comes to Meta, and chief CEO is Mark Zuckerberg, who was essentially Meta, which is the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, as well as WhatsApp, was on trial. And what was the trial about? Well, in this case, you have the prosecution essentially questioning Instagram's head, Adam Mosseri, which testified in federal trial examining allegations that Meta deliberately designed Instagram and Facebook to encourage compulsive use among children while failing to protect their safety, right? As you know, the thing when doom scrolling and the addiction to social media. Well, this is what this examination was about. The case is being heard in the federal court in Oakland, California. And when it comes to the United States, they accused Meta of addictive design, right? The algorithm of Meta, when it comes to Instagram and Facebook, to be in such a way that it is unlawful when it comes to how children get addicted to social media and also an unlawful collection of children's data. So a major focus of when it comes to Instagram was, they've put forward a focus on take a break feature. Right. If you've been on it for so long, then there would be a pop-up take a break. Now, approximately 1.8% of teens reportedly activated that feature when it was optional. and it became a default setting for teens accounts in 2024. Now, the head of Instagram denied Meta deliberately delayed safety protections, and Meta also disputed that the claims that its platform caused adolescents harm when you have such young people who are doom scrolling and just consuming so much data and all kinds of data, right? And falling into this addictive pattern of being on their phone, on their device. So this is what the case was about when it comes to these algorithms and this infinite scrolling and notifications and engagement tools to make sure that if you're off Instagram, that you come back on. And so now it's been announced as of August 26th that Meta has now agreed to a $16.68 billion settlement with a bipartisan coalition of US states to resolve this federal lawsuit that is alleging that the company designed Facebook and Instagram to addict children and not protect them. And this historic deal cuts short this could have been a very high profile federal trial in Oakland, California. Now, the company faces accusations of violating Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which is essentially collecting data on children and also contributing a nationwide youth mental health crisis. Now, Meta did agree to pay the maximum of $16.68 billion. And this is the reports also indicate that this agreement is across 52 jurisdictions, totaling because it was a class action lawsuit from several states, it would have mounted to $17.1 billion, right? So this combined is the combined amount when you overlap the privacy settlements, right? But the core sum will be distributed to states in annual installments over a 10 years period to fund youth online safety initiatives. And there's also a mandate that the platform change its behavior. As a part of the settlement, Meta is legally required to implement sweeping new protections for teenagers that are using their platform across the United States. And these include mandatory daily usage limits, nighttime activity blocks, restrictions on push notifications during school hours, and also enhancing this age verification measures. Now, when it comes to admission of guilt, because the settlement was done before a trial would take place, there was no admission of guilt. In the filed court documents, Meta explicitly denied any wrongdoing or liability, maintaining that it has consistently worked to safeguard minors on its platform, but it made this deal to prevent it from going into federal courts. So when it comes to the states, this coalition of states that led this lawsuit. There's about 29 states, including California, Colorado, Kentucky, and New Jersey. And those are just some of the states in the 29 states that claim that Meta intentionally weaponized its algorithms to make sure that young users stay addicted, stay on their platform, and secretly harvesting their personal data without any parental consent or controls, and that was to train AI models. So, very, very, if you'd say, sinister acts of targeting children, exploiting children, and now this is the time where this settlement is very significant for Meta, as it's also facing financial exposure, right? With the states seeking anywhere from $200 billion to 1.4 trillion in statutory penalties. So to those staggering numbers, Meta said, okay, we'll give you the almost $17 billion and say we're not guilty and close this up before we go to trial, which is massive. Now, when it comes to another thing, there is a monumental settlement that is closely following other massive courtroom defeats for Meta. This includes an earlier August conviction where in New Mexico, a judge ordered the company to pay nearly $1 billion in civil penalties and abatement funds in creating a public nuisance that endangered children. So this is where things are at when it comes to Meta. And there's only so much parents can do when they give their children devices, whether it's their phone or their tablets. And so the burden of responsibility are on these tech giants to make sure that children are not put in harm's way. And big news for this week, which is Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan Markle reportedly returned to Great Britain. And this is after 6 years of being away. If you recall, they were royal seniors in the royal family, and they left, coming first to Canada and saying that they would like to propose a half in, half out royal measures where they would do royal duties. This was when the Queen was still alive. And then half out would be they would pursue their own, private life and private business ventures. And the Queen made an ultimatum saying, no, you cannot be half in, half out senior royals or just royals at all, working royals. And then you had Prince Harry and Meghan decide that, okay, they're going to be fully out because there was no compromise on that. And then they went from Canada and they went to California, purchased a beautiful home in Montecito, beautiful area. They had $100 million Netflix deal, a $20 million deal with Spotify. And it looked like they were doing quite well, putting out Harry's book, Spare, the podcast that Meghan Markle did, Duchess did, and then you had the docuseries on Netflix, part of their deal. And then after 6 years, there was speculation, we covered this last week, that they're going to be moving back to England. And that was after the short visit that Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, had with King Charles III. And then shortly after, they announced that they'll be moving back. And so they arrived this week to Britain with their children, Archie and Lilibet. And the family is expected to live outside of London with both children enrolled in British schools beginning next week. So, a week before school starts, they move their children from California to England, and the couple will retain their home in California, according to them, and Spain, and have no plans to resume official royal duties. Their representatives have not immediately confirmed in terms of what their role will be, if any, but it is assumed that they will stay private citizens. And so this is the family was reportedly landed in Birmingham Airport, and their children, Archie, 7 years old, and Lilibet is 5 years old. They will be starting school next week. And so that's essentially the case where their British home will be private, it'll be non-royal, and it'll be a residence outside of London, and they will, everything else they say it will stay as is. And so there's been lots of talk about what was this sudden move? Was it Harry's US visa status? A reason of this quick announcement and quick exit of the United States. There's also speculation that the couple that no longer have a Netflix deal and a Spotify deal, and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, a line of As Ever of jams and products, which was a deal with Netflix, didn't do so well. And so there was a lot of speculation. Is it the fact that the couple just are not getting the financial benefits that they thought they would in terms of deals, and to be able to support their lifestyle, and perhaps the safer choices to go back home where Prince Harry is a prince and his father is king and his older brother is going to be the future king. And so is it just better that way? So there's been multiple speculations about Harry's US visa status, their money in a way, their financial situations drying up in California. And then you have this quick meeting with King Charles, and then the announcement that they're going to be enrolling their children. So it looks like a more permanent situation, because when you enroll your children into school, you're less likely to pull them out of school and then just go back to the United States. So this is a plan. And now it's reported that the Duchess will plan to still operate her As Ever business from Britain while traveling periodically to the United States, where she is a citizen. And there was also speculation that she might return back to acting, and then that fell through. It was a Guy Ritchie production, and there was speculation that she was going to have a role, and then it was announced she will not. And then there's the security arrangements that remain the big question: who's going to pay for them now that they're not working royals back in England? Will the British taxpayers have to pay for their security? This is not something that has been confirmed. And will they continue maintaining their own private security? And so this is all very new. And this is the tabloids in the UK are all about this right now, as there's a lot of speculations of what actually took place, what was the quick exit. But needless to say, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are back in England. That's all the time we have today on Ymedia Newsroom. I'm Ramona Singh. Until tomorrow, take care and be well.